How are you feeling about your running backs heading into the first week of the fantasy playoffs? Do you have top 10 candidates every single week that you know you're putting in your lineup no matter what? Or are you one of the individuals that finds themselves trying to figure out the best combination of running backs each and every week? Well, if you're the one having trouble setting your lineup, then this video is going to be for you. And since it's the playoffs, it might be the most important running back video that you watch yet. Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome to week one of the fantasy playoffs. And this year has been an exhausting one for the running back position, trying to figure out what we are going to get every single week. Unless you own Christian McCaffrey, then you already know at that point. But in this video, we're going to be breaking down every matchup for week 15 and what it means for the running backs on your team. But before I get into the analysis, why don't we do another giveaway? And this time, I've got an autographed Travis Etienne jersey to give you. And it's super easy to get in on this drawing. The only thing that you have to do is create a free account over at Pristine Auction by using the link down in the description of our video. Once you create that account, you're going to get a $10 coupon to use on your very first purchase over on Pristine Auction. And you're also going to be entered to win this Travis Etienne jersey when you also leave a comment down below letting me know how your running backs have been doing so far this year. We're also doing a super special giveaway with Pristine Auction. We have got an autographed Justin Herbert Funko Pop that we want to give away. And to get in on that, all you have to do is win an auction over on Pristine Auction with an account using code word headliners or the link in the description down below. And it doesn't matter how much you win the auction for. You will be entered as soon as you send the receipt verifying the email address associated with your account to info@thefantasyheadliners.com. And once you send that over, you're going to be entered into the drawing to win the Justin Herbert autographed Funko Pop. You just have to win an auction by 11:59 p.m. on Christmas Day to be entered. All right, but enough of the giveaways. It's time to hop into the analysis. It is week one of the fantasy playoffs. Y'all need this more now than ever. And with the Chargers and Raiders on Thursday Night Football, we've got some key stars with injuries. The Los Angeles Chargers are going to be without Justin Herbert, it seems like, this week. And because of that, they're probably going to be leaning on the run game. Now, the Chargers are ranked 25th against the run right now, but they feel like they've been substantially better over the last several weeks. Austin Eckler, huge bounce back week last week. 50 yards on 10 carries, had a touchdown, added another few receptions with over 30 receiving yards. Those are the kind of numbers we need from him every single week. Now, earlier in the week, there was reports that Joshua Kelly was essentially going to split touches with Austin Eckler, and that never happened. In fact, Kelly didn't even see as many snaps as what Isaiah Spiller ended up seeing. Austin Eckler was still the clear lead back and will be once again in this matchup going up against Las Vegas, but he's going to have to be a major part of the game plan if the Chargers have any chance of winning, and volume alone will put him in green. Unfortunately, gonna list Josh Jacobs in red. As of this recording, there is not a whole lot of information on what is going on with Josh Jacobs' knee. We know he left the game and he never ended up coming back. We'll continue to monitor that status, and if he doesn't play on Thursday night, which at this point probably looks like it won't happen, it would be Zamir White and Amir Abdullah that would be splitting the snaps, splitting the targets, and seeing splits on carries on the ground as well. And neither of those two guys I would be super excited about. Maybe Amir Abdullah in like an emergency situation or a PPR league. Zamir White, not really good enough in this matchup for me to invest in either for this week. So Josh Jacobs, we will wait to learn a little bit more. And for some reason, if he's able to magically play, we'll reevaluate later in the week. Well, would you look at that? Another matchup, another injury to talk about. Alexander Mattison also leaving his game early last week, and as of this recording, no significant updates on the status of his potential return in week 15. So right now we have to assume Ty Chandler will be the guy for the Minnesota Vikings. We've seen Ty Chandler break some explosive plays this year, and at times he's looked a lot better than Alexander Mattison. But when he came in last week to replace Mattison going up against a Raiders defense that is ranked right next to the Cincinnati defense that he faces this week, he really couldn't get anything going. So the matchup, it's not bad, and it could lead to some potential for Ty Chandler to give us flex-like numbers. Do I expect a huge upside from him? Probably not. But we also still don't know if Justin Jefferson is going to be able to play this week. And we know that Josh Dobbs had some issues last week at the quarterback position. So how efficient are they going to be passing the football against the Bengals? They might have to lean on the run just a little bit. And while I don't expect a ton of upside, he definitely could be a guy that at least could fill in and give us some numbers that won't lose our week, but certainly wouldn't win it either. Minnesota's defense is currently ranked number 5 against the run, and Joe Mixon has a nice little streak of games going right now where he has produced some pretty high RB1 type numbers. In the 7 games since their bye week, Joe Mixon has been an RB1 5 times, and 4 of those times have been 7 or higher as well. Definitely seeing some upside from him here in the second half of the season that we did not see at the beginning of the year. Efficiency-wise, still having some problems with that. But he is scoring and he is putting up volume and helping in the passing game. Even in a tougher matchup, I will still go ahead and bet on Joe Mixon to be top 15 or higher because Jake Browning has been pretty good at quarterback since taking over for Joe Burrow. People are starting to talk a little bit more about Chase Brown, and his big play potential has shown up over the last couple of weeks with an increase in his volume. But it is really predicated on 2 big plays. He had a rush for over 30 yards 2 weeks ago, and then he had a 54-yard receiving touchdown this past week. Outside of that, he has not done a whole lot. So when you look at Chase Brown, if you're trying to utilize him as like a flex option this week, I don't think that I would end up going that way. Joe Mixon is still seeing the large amount of the volume both on the ground and in the passing game. Chase Brown is getting worked in. He's definitely getting some looks, and we've seen the big play potential from him. But at this point, it's still just too risky for me to try and utilize him as an actual starter. But if you own Joe Mixon, you really need to have Chase Brown. Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren are coming off pretty abysmal performances last week against the New England Patriots, and we baked that into their rankings because we knew that matchup was going to be a little tougher than what they had recently faced. But now they get a chance to bounce back against the Indianapolis Colts, who are currently ranked 26 against the run and allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the running back position. We have seen basically an even split between Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, with a little bit more volume on the ground going to Najee. Now we know Najee brings a little bit of a safer floor because he is getting more volume right now, while Jaylen Warren brings a little bit of a higher ceiling because he has more big play potential that we've seen. But considering Mitchell Trubisky will be the starter once again for Pittsburgh this week, it is highly likely that they try to lean on the run game, and we see quite a bit of Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren both. I'm going to lock them both into a green status this week. While they might not have the highest upside in the world, given the fact that they are splitting carries, I wouldn't be surprised if Najee Harris at least finds the end zone and then Jaylen Warren breaks away some big plays to put together a nice upside with yards for us. Pittsburgh may be ranked 21st against the run on the year, but over the last 4 weeks, they have allowed the 11th fewest rushing yards in the NFL. And Zach Moss just has not looked like the guy that at the beginning of the season helped lead us to some fantasy victories. He's actually costing us some games right now. So are you willing to risk it with him once again this week? Me personally, I'm going to keep him in yellow because of the amount of volume he is getting. Even though he has not produced over the last couple of weeks, he's seeing more volume than almost every NFL running back right now because he's not splitting touches with anybody. That gives him a floor that could be a little bit higher than most options that you would have. And given the state of the running back position, which has consistently been beat up all year long, you may not have a choice this week. For Zach Moss, he's going to be outside my top 12, and he's probably going to be closer to 24 than anything. We'll go ahead and dive deeper into the rankings on Thursday, but for right now, just know he does not have the upside that we saw at one point earlier in the year. The running backs in the Broncos and Lions matchup reminds me of an outfit that you might be putting together. Javonte Williams is the pants. The pants are, they're not spectacular. They get the job done. They don't really stand out, though. They don't really make or break the outfit. The shirt is David Montgomery, your favorite shirt. You feel confident in it. It looks good on you. It is comfortable. And then Jahmyr Gibbs is the kicks. Like, the kicks make or break the outfit. If you got a sweet pair of kicks, everybody's going to notice and you're going to be styling. But if your kicks aren't up to par, people are going to be pointing and laughing. And speaking of putting together a great outfit, I'm going to toss it over to Taylor, who's going to give you a message from the sponsor of this video, Marine Layer.
Hey everybody, it's Taylor back again to talk about Marine Layer, our sponsor. I really do love their clothes. I'm wearing this shirt, it's from there, and it's been through several washes already, still insanely comfortable, holding up super well. I don't even take it off to sleep anymore, honestly. But for real, last time I talked about the Respun program, and I went ahead and signed up for this tee recycling kit. I'm gonna throw several of my old t-shirts from the back of my closet in there and send it in and get a credit, because I've got my eye on a few things on their website that I probably gonna put on the Christmas list, or maybe just buy myself for Christmas, honestly, with that credit that I get. But with the holidays coming up, Marine Layer is giving a special discount to Headliner Nation. We actually have like our own link now. So you can go to marinelayer.com/headliners. That's 15% off your entire order at marinelayer.com. Maybe you're looking for a gift for you or somebody for the holiday season. Marine Layer has you covered with literally the perfect gift. You can go once again to marinelayer.com/headliners for 15% off your entire order for a limited time. They're saving your closet, or even somebody else's if you're buying a gift, I guess. One t-shirt at a time.
All right, now that we got you all looking dapper out there, let's talk about the matchup itself. And for Javonte Williams, I feel like what I said earlier is absolutely correct. He hasn't had the highest ceiling this week, and he had a pretty decent game. He found the end zone last week, and we're starting to see a little bit of flashes of what made Javonte Williams a really popular pick prior to him getting hurt last season. The explosiveness, the cutting, the ability to break and miss tackles hasn't quite come back yet, but he's getting the volume and he's being trotted out there as the guy right now. He's getting more snaps than the other two running backs on this roster combined. So if you're playing Javonte Williams, you're not putting him out there to absolutely win you the week, but he's a good like RB2 or flex option right now, depending on where you drafted him, because he's getting touches and he's putting together enough points each week to give you a pretty decent floor. This matchup against Detroit is not good though. Detroit's defense continues to struggle, but up front they are still ranked 9th against the run and allow the 3rd fewest fantasy points to the running back position. So even if Javonte Williams were to clear 18 touches this week, you're probably still going to be looking at a pretty low ceiling unless he finds the end zone. For me, he's more of a low-end RB2 this week. Is he a start? It really depends on what you have around him. If you're looking for upside, it wouldn't be him. But if you're looking for floor, you could always just throw him in your flex and you'll probably be just fine. I think I speak for everybody when I say how shocking this turnaround is from the Denver Broncos. A team that looked like they couldn't even find themselves and had a historically bad defense to start the year is all of a sudden a game behind Kansas City for the lead in the AFC West. And they're going to try to continue their hot streak in Detroit. And when you take a look at the Denver Broncos, their defense has played much better as of recent. But their running defense, not so much. They're still ranked dead last against the run and allow the most fantasy points to the running back position. And even over the last 4 weeks, they've allowed the 10th most rushing yards in the NFL. So even though the pass defense has gotten better and they've been playing a lot better as a team, teams can still run the ball against them. And at home, I think Detroit is going to absolutely pound the football this week, for a couple of different reasons. Number one, the defense continues to be a liability. They don't have a whole lot of depth, they have injuries, and they look absolutely exhausted. Keep the ball on your side, run the football, keep the Denver defense on the field, wear them down, and then the offense isn't going to get a chance to put up points. But not only that, Jared Goff has been really shaky over the last several games. Not everything is his fault, but a lot of these turnovers are just something that needs to be corralled. He cannot continue to give the ball away to opposing teams, and that's part of the reason why the defense continues to wear down. Well, how do you fix that? You run the football with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Both of these guys are probably going to see double-digit carries this week. Both of them have pretty good upside, and both of them will be inside my top 10. I've got good news and I've got bad news in the Atlanta and Carolina matchup. Let's talk about the good news for Bijan Robinson. Over the last 4 games, he's been an RB1 3 times, finishing as the RB11 twice and the RB3 once. And the other performance was at RB20. So over the last 4 games, he's been an RB2 all 4 games. It's good to see that finally kind of pop up here at the end of the season. But the bad news with him is it brings a lot of inconsistencies, because even though he's on the field a lot more often, it feels like he gets pulled off at critical times. And he finally had a goal line touchdown, which is absolutely great to see from Bijan Robinson. But it's one of those things where it just feels risky every single week trying to rely on him as being our RB1. And a lot of you drafted him to be your RB1. Now, back to the good news, though, is that he gets a great matchup this week going up against Carolina. Carolina is allowing the 4th most fantasy points to the running back position right now. It's through the air where Carolina's defense does a pretty good job of limiting teams, but they have struggled stopping teams on the ground. Now, Bijan Robinson has gotten some good matchups this year and just not been able to get it done. So we'll see if he can get it done this week. But given the amount of volume that he sees and the fact that he's playing 80% of the snaps right now, he's definitely got to be in green once again, because the matchup is also super solid. Even though Atlanta's defense is ranked 15th against the run right now, they are allowing the 2nd fewest fantasy points to the running back position. And Chuba Hubbard, just like Bijan, is getting more than the majority of touches for his offense. It seems like he's out there for every single down that you could possibly think of. I mean, he played like 60 snaps this past week, which is an insane number in this era that we're seeing for running backs right now. So even though he doesn't have a ton of upside in a matchup that will be a little bit tougher, Atlanta did allow over 100 yards to Rachaad White last week. For me, Chuba Hubbard is going to be inside the top 24. Not really close to top 10 potential or even top 12, but definitely a guy that if you need to rely on in your flex position this week, you could do a whole lot worse with a whole lot of other people. There's not a ton to desire in this matchup for the Bears and the Browns. Now, the Browns offense, which has been very good this season, has been a little bit worse for wear over the last several weeks against the running back position. So D'Onta Foreman, who was the clear lead back against Detroit this past week, does bring a little bit of value. Over the last 4 weeks, the Cleveland Browns have allowed the 7th most rushing yards in the league. My biggest concern here is that Chicago's going to have to play from behind. Now, this past week, where they led Detroit for a majority of the game, they were able to utilize D'Onta Foreman and get him out there and let him run the football, right? Keep the ball away from Detroit's offense was kind of the name of the game when Chicago was leading. However, Cleveland, with how good their defense is, if they go out and get a couple of stops early on and Chicago finds themselves playing from behind at the end of the first quarter, I don't want them to abandon the run, because right now, Cleveland's weakness is against the run, and they should hit them where they're weak. I don't know if I have a whole lot of faith in the Chicago play calling to continue to do what would be the right thing here. We'll see what ends up happening, but this week, with D'Onta Foreman being the clear lead back in neutral or positive game script, and Cleveland's defense not being as great against the run as they were earlier in the year, there is a chance for increased value. For Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt, I've got to list them both in red right now, because number one, Chicago's defense has played much better over the last several weeks. Since they made some trades, they're looking a lot better, and actually a defense that's getting stops when they need to. They have allowed the 2nd fewest rushing yards in the NFL this season. And as of this recording, Jerome Ford is dealing with an injury without a whole lot of an update on what we could see from him later in the week. So we're going to have to keep an eye on this. If it ends up being just Kareem Hunt with no Jerome Ford, there is an opportunity to get Kareem Hunt to yellow here and potentially move him towards the top 24 running backs. But that's only if Jerome Ford ends up being out. If Ford does end up playing, this is going to be too much of a risky start for either of these players. Over the last 3 weeks, Rachaad White has ran for 100, 84, and 102 rushing yards. And in each one of those matchups, he averaged over 4 yards per carry. And this past week, when he had 25 carries, which was a career high, his longest run was only 12 yards. So he wasn't reliant on big plays, and he put together consistently good runs. I mean, prior to this week, his highest yards in a game on the ground was only 73, and he had only averaged 4 yards per carry twice on the season. The efficiency that I have criticized Rachaad White for and been asking about has finally shown itself. And over the the past 3 weeks, you have seen a guy that isn't reliant on big plays, that isn't relying on scoring a touchdown. He's putting together the full package of offensive production that you need. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, I know I've been critical of Rachaad White, and I know I've hated on him at times this season, if that's what you want to call it. But everything I've said about him up until this point has been true. But he's proving me wrong. And all the points that I've criticized him for, he's getting better at. So you know what? That's excellent. I'm never rooting against a player. So it's great to see that he's putting together big games, touchdowns, efficiency, and consistency on the ground that I've asked for all season long. Keep riding Rachaad White, because here in the fantasy playoffs, he's definitely going to be a guy that's going to help you win a championship. And I'm willing to go a step further and go higher on the current line of 60.5 rushing yards that he is currently set at over on Underdog. The Green Bay Packers have allowed that many rushing yards plus more to the main running backs of each of the last 5 teams that they have faced. And while I do have a little bit of a concern that if Green Bay comes out a little bit angry after losing to New York this past week and gets a decent lead on Tampa Bay, that Tampa Bay is going to have to get away from the run a little bit, and Rachaad White is going to pick up his volume through the air instead. But even with that being said, I don't think that they completely abandon the run, and if Rachaad White can keep up that efficiency going up against a defense that has allowed the 3rd most rushing yards on the season, he may not even need that much volume to get to this line. And if you're looking to play this pick or any other pick'ems that we talk about throughout the week, you're going to need to head on over to Underdog and sign up with our code Headliners. If you do that and make a deposit of at least $10, Underdog is going to match that deposit up to $100, and you're going to get a special pick'em to play this week that is almost guaranteed to hit. It would be the perfect thing to pair with this Rachaad White pick'em. Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon have a lot of concerns for me this week. Aaron Jones mainly because he's missed another week and we still don't know when he's going to be ready to play. It sounds like he's getting closer, but Green Bay is not wanting to risk it with him. But Tampa Bay has been really good up front. They're allowing the 10th fewest rushing yards on the season. And even though they were missing Vita Vea from the middle of their defensive line this past week, which is a big reason why teams have trouble running against them, they kept the 3 Atlanta running backs under 85 total rushing yards. So going up against this Green Bay Packers offense that has had trouble finding explosive runs on the ground this year, I'm going to go ahead and say both of these guys are a huge risk, even if Aaron Jones ends up playing. But keep an eye on the rankings on Thursday just in case something changes and we need to discuss it a little bit more. So my ranking of Breece Hall last week wasn't exactly accurate, but part of my analysis I thought was pretty spot on. One of the reasons that he was ranked so low is because he has been bad on the ground as of late. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. There's nothing good to say about it. He just has not been the running back that we saw bursts of earlier this season and at points last year. And part of that just has to do with offensive line issues and really the gameplay as the offense as a whole. But I don't know if Aaron Rodgers stole Zach Wilson's leg and attached it to himself and played as Zach Wilson this week, but Zach Wilson looked absolutely fantastic. And part of my analysis with Breece Hall was the fact that if this game is going to be in crappy weather, and if for some reason the New York Jets trail, which didn't end up happening, but still, he was going to get some dump-offs, and we would hope that he would make up some of those points in the passing game. He made up some pretty hefty points in the passing game. 8 receptions for 86 yards and a touchdown. And this week, going up against Miami, that allows the 8th fewest rushing yards and the 8th fewest fantasy points to the running back position, he's probably going to have to do some of the same thing. Now, is his one performance from last week going to vault him back up into the top 12? Probably not. I think he's going to be just on the outside looking in. Hopefully Miami is fully healthy this week and they're able to go ahead and get back on track with a win against the New York Jets. And if that happens, it's probably going to be negative game script. And once again, Breece Hall is going to have to make up for the running game through the air. It was good to see Raheem Mostert fully healthy and getting a bulk of the workload this past week. And I kind of had the roles reversed. Over the last 2 weeks, it really felt like Devonta Chan was going to be pushed out as the main running back, and Mostert was going to get a little bit more rest to make sure he stays healthy for the stretch run. And that just didn't end up happening. Mostert ended up being out there for a large majority of the time, and we saw huge plays from both running backs. We just looked at Devon Achane this week, though, and realized he's probably human. Not only was this his first full game this season where he finished outside the top 24 running backs, it was his first full game this season where he finished outside the top 5 running backs. But seeing as how Miami is a little banged up right now, Tyreek Hill definitely not 100% after twisting the ankle up yesterday, they're probably going to run the football. And they're going up against a Jets team that has allowed the 5th most rushing yards on the season. And we know Miami is explosive on the ground. I expect a heavy dose of both Mostert and Achane this week, and both of them are probably going to be inside the top 12, just like the Detroit Lions tandem. The New York Giants and the New Orleans Saints are going to bring my Manscaped must-watch matchup of the week. And with Christmas just a couple of weeks away, this is your last opportunity to head on over to Manscaped and order some stocking stuffers or something special to go under the tree for your loved ones. And I mean, you could order something for your friend or coworkers, but that might be a little weird. But whatever it may be, go check out all their great new products on the shelf over there. And when you check out, use code word headliners, because you're going to get 20% off your entire order and free shipping. What a year this has been for the backup quarterback, and Tommy DeVito continues to add to that legacy of what 2023 will be remembered by. What an awesome scene in New York with his friends and family there in the stands and him leading that comeback win over the Green Bay Packers. But the play of Tommy DeVito over the last several weeks has actually led to a better opportunity for Saquon Barkley, because it is allowing the running game to function better, because DeVito is playing well and defenses still have to respect that. And when you got a guy like Saquon that is getting over 20 touches a game right now and is really the focal point of that offense, the run game feeding off the pass game feeding off the run game, and Barkley helping in both of those areas, he's going to be a green start based on volume alone. And while the New Orleans Saints haven't allowed a ton of points to the running back position this year, they have allowed a decent amount of yards. The only area that they rank outside the top 15 in on the defensive side of the ball is the run game, where they're currently ranked 26th. And Alvin Kamara continues to be a workhorse for us. He is the only running back right now to be in the top 24 and 100% of his games played this season. He's scoring touchdowns. He's still getting those checkdowns, and hopefully the run game portion of it continues to build up like what we have seen recently. Now, this past week from a volume standpoint wasn't great, but he still scored a touchdown and he was still pretty darn efficient on the ground. So going up against a New York Giants defense that has given up quite a bit on the ground this year, Alvin Kamara could be back to top 10 potential once again. Houston's run game may be a tough one to figure out for the rest of the season, because Dameon Pierce was hurt and Devin Singletary stepped in and put together a couple of really nice top 10 performances. Then Dameon Pierce comes back and it still looked like Devin Singletary's job didn't have quite the ceiling, because Pierce was getting some touches, but not really anything to be super concerned about. And then all of a sudden 2 weeks ago, Dameon Pierce is splitting the touches again, and Devin Singletary seems to kind of be phased out and really only usable in the passing game. And then this past week, Dameon Pierce is phased out and Devin Singletary is getting all the touches. So it's really a lot of up and down with this offense right now. And unfortunately this week, if CJ Stroud can't play, Tank Dell's already out, Dalton Schultz has been injured, Nico Collins banged up, Noah Brown hasn't been super healthy. Going up against the Tennessee Titans, it might be really hard to stay balanced. But if Davis Mills ends up needing to start this week over CJ Stroud, Devin Singletary could be getting a few dump-offs and likely kind of a PPR flex type play. I don't know if I'm willing to risk it with no CJ Stroud and others injured this week, but he does bring some sort of an okay floor if he can get maybe 5 or 6 targets. Now, if you look at just the fantasy points from this past week for the Tennessee Titans, you're going to be like, yeah, Derrick Henry, let's go, the guy that he used to be. Not really. Now, it's nice that he scored 2 touchdowns. This is his 3rd straight game with 2 scores, and it's a testament to how this Tennessee offense is able to better move the ball with Will Levis at quarterback and at least get them into the red zone. And Levis, you know, he has his issues and hasn't looked great at times, and at other times has flashed some potential. So moving forward, it's probably going to be a lot of the same thing, because on the ground, it was a tough matchup going up against Miami, like we discussed. Derrick Henry did not get going, and he barely averaged 3 yards per carry. And Tyjae Spears was on the field quite a bit once again. Now, Tyjae Spears has been a guy all season long that has been stealing snaps from Derrick Henry, but it hasn't turned into any fantasy viable performances. Until recently, because over the last couple of weeks, he has been inside the top 24 running backs. He's becoming a little bit of a PPR option for us now that he's actually getting a little bit more of a workload instead of just seeing the snaps themselves. But I'm conflicted with the matchup this week, because if CJ Stroud can't go and they're dealing with all the injuries that I already discussed, Houston might not be as competitive as we would like to get Spears back on the field for a lot of those snaps and dump-offs that you might see in a negative game script. And Houston is ranked 7th against the run right now, so Derrick Henry could have a tough time once again. But in the red zone, it's Derrick Henry's ball, and it's his potential to score. So the touchdown upside will be there once again for Tennessee and Derrick Henry. And then if they play from behind, it would be Tyjae Spears. Now, if Houston was fully healthy, Tyjae Spears would be in yellow for me and would be a consideration inside the top 30 as a potential flex option. But until I know a little bit more about their health for the coming week, unfortunately, I'm going to have to list him as a high risk right now, because he may not get the type of volume that we would like if Tennessee leads this game. The Chiefs and Patriots matchup is going to bring a battle of the backup running backs. The good news for Isaiah Pacheco and Ramondre Stevenson, they haven't been placed on IR, which opens a possible return for them during your fantasy championships. But unfortunately, based on all the news that I've heard, they definitely will not be available to us this week. So now we're talking about Jerick McKinnon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and Zeke Elliott. First for the Chiefs. Last week, we spoke pretty loudly about Jerick McKinnon, and even though he was outproduced and out-touched by Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he was able to find the end zone, which gave him more fantasy points. And now going up against New England that has a tough defense, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, even if he sees more touches once again, definitely doesn't have enough upside for me to even consider putting him in my lineup. It would be about Jerick McKinnon once again for me this week. But we have seen the Kansas City Chiefs not really want to utilize him this year the way they did down the stretch last season, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, especially with how frustrating the gameplay has been from the Kansas City wide receivers this year. So honestly, I'm not even putting either of them on the graphic this week. Neither of them have a whole lot of volume or numbers to even show on there. And in terms of playing them, if you want to risk it with Jerick McKinnon, you're more than welcome to. But unless you play in a PPR league, you're going to be hoping for a touchdown, and it's probably not even worth it. Now, I banged the Zeke Elliott drum really loud last week. In the waiver wire video, I told you all that it did not matter your position, you needed to pick up Ezekiel Elliott. And then in the start and sit video, I was like, hey, we need to make sure that he is in our lineup this week, because even if he doesn't have the highest ceiling in the world, he's basically going to play all of the snaps. His volume alone is worth a start. And in the rankings episode, I had him inside the top 20, and I had him at one of the highest levels in all of the consensus rankings. So Zeke Elliott, hey, appreciate you, because everyone in Headliner Nation that put you in their lineup last week was definitely feeling good after Thursday Night Football. And once again, going up against the Kansas City Chiefs, which is a little bit of a tougher matchup and limits his floor, he's going to be on the field a majority of the time. At worst, he's a flex option. At best, he's an RB2. But more than likely, there's not a whole lot of you that can risk keeping him out of your lineup because you just don't have the running back depth to make that happen. I'm pretty sure I messed up earlier in the video because I think I said Alvin Kamara was the only running back to be a top 24 running back in every game he's played this season. And that would be inaccurate because, of course, Christian McCaffrey has also been inside the top 24. But I'm in the middle of recording and editing, and quite honestly, to go back and try and fix that is going to take way more time than what is even needed. So if you heard that and you're like, what in the world, Kyle, are you talking about? My apologies. But for Christian McCaffrey, last week was actually the first time that he finished outside the top 9 for several weeks, and only the third time all year that it happened. And this week, in a really, really good matchup against the Arizona Cardinals that allow the second most fantasy points to the running back position and the second most rushing yards in the NFL this season, Christian McCaffrey will absolutely be locked in as the #1 overall running back and probably player in all of fantasy football. But let's talk about James Conner. He was on a bye last week, but previous to that, facing his old team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, he ran for over 100 yards and scored 2 touchdowns in a really nice revenge game, finishing as the RB for that week. But that hasn't been the staple of consistency that we have seen from James Conner all year. He gets a decent amount of rushing attempts and a decent amount of rushing yards, but he doesn't score a whole lot, and he doesn't work in the passing game basically at all. He's not even averaging 2 receptions per game right now, and because of that, his upside is really limited, especially in a matchup that is so good against San Francisco. For me this week in James Conner, he's kind of a low-end RB2 that will definitely see a decent amount of carries on the ground. If I had to guess, anywhere between 14 and 18 carries on the ground, if Arizona can at least keep it close in the first half. Run the football with James Conner, try to keep it away from the San Francisco offense, and do everything that you can to just run the clock out and stay in a neutral game script. If they do that, James Conner definitely sneaks inside the top 24. But if the game gets away from them early, James Conner could end up falling even further. Prior to the bye, Washington's Brian Robinson was ruled out at halftime due to a hamstring injury. And since that happened, we have not received a ton of updates on where he currently stands. Now, he did have the bye last week, which will help him heal up a little bit and get ready to play. But those soft tissue issues, especially hamstrings, can be tricky at times and aren't necessarily able to rush back from them. And even if he does play this week, how limited could Brian Robinson be? For right now, I am going to go in under the impression that Brian Robinson will not be able to play or will be limited this week going up against the Los Angeles Rams and their defense that currently allows the 7th fewest fantasy points to the running back position. Now, because of that, I'm going to list him in red. And of course, if anything changes and we find out that he does play this week, I'm willing to bump him to yellow and then Antonio Gibson down to red. Because Brian Robinson is the lead back. And in the matchups you don't think he'll do well in, he seems to figure out a way to catch a pass or have a big run or score a touchdown or do something to kind of throw it back at you, right? He's been kind of my running back kryptonite this season. So we'll continue to monitor things over the next few days and check out the rankings episode on Thursday to see if anything changes for him then. But for Antonio Gibson, he will be in yellow as of right now. Because in his last 4 games that he has played, he has been a top 24 running back 3 times due to a little bit of an increased usage in the passing game finally. Something we thought that might happen towards the beginning of the year and never did is finally coming to fruition. We'll see if that continues. And like I already mentioned and want to reiterate with Brian Robinson, if Brian Robinson misses or we find out that he is limited, Antonio Gibson will stay in yellow, will probably be inside the top 30, and Brian Robinson will be red. If we find out that Brian Robinson is fully ready to go and will play this week, Brian Robinson will then turn to yellow, will be inside the top 30, and Antonio Gibson will turn to red, and he may be at the very back end of the top 30, but could sneak his way in as well. If there would be one bet that I'm willing to make, it's that Kyren Williams is on a majority of playoff rosters right now and could end up being on a majority of championship rosters as well. He's in the running for the best waiver wire pickup right alongside Puka Nacua, his teammate, all season, and he has been absolutely fantastic. And I know I've already said this a few times this year, but I am kicking myself that I did not push Kyren Williams to you guys more this offseason like I did last offseason. But the good news is I've seen a lot of comments that said, hey Kyle, I remember you talking about Kyren Williams last year and how much you liked him, but I kept my eye on him this year and I was still able to grab him up, and some of you even drafted him later in your rounds. If that was you, congratulations, because this is a guy that is getting so much volume right now, that is playing at a high level efficiency-wise, scoring touchdowns in an offense that focuses really on one running back. Kyren Williams is going to be a top 10 guy a majority of the rest of the year. And even though Washington's run defense is kind of middle of the pack, it doesn't seem to be an issue for Kyren Williams, who still plays pretty well going up against tougher opponents. Give me some Kyren Williams this week to be inside the top 10 once again. After a stretch of only one top 24 performances over the course of 6 games, Tony Pollard has kind of turned the corner here, and now he's given us 4 straight games of top 24 performances. 2 of those have been inside the top 12. But the upside isn't there. And that's one of the reasons that Tony Pollard was drafted so high. And unfortunately, part of the reason he hasn't had that upside, I fully believe, is the way that he's being used this year. And even though he's being a little bit more consistent right now, the addition of Rico Dowdle getting some pretty significant touches and scoring is becoming a little concerning. Now, Rico Dowdle is not going to be on the graphic because a couple of touchdowns over the last few weeks isn't really enough to put him inside the starter conversation as of yet. I've mentioned him in the waiver wire video several times, and he's definitely a guy that we're keeping an eye on. If his production stays consistent, or if he starts to cut into more and more of Tony Pollard's work, then we put him in the discussion of potential flex play. But as of right now, really, he's just a handcuff to Tony Pollard. And this matchup isn't that bad for Pollard. And with the way the Dallas Cowboys are playing, if they can go up and put positive game script on the Buffalo Bills, Tony Pollard's got some touchdown potential. I don't love his floor right now, though. It's been fairly consistent over the last few weeks, but not nearly enough to make me feel like good and warm about putting Tony Pollard in my lineup. If you're sticking him in there because you know you're going to get some okay fantasy points from him and hopefully he continues the RB2 production, that's great. But if you're putting him in there expecting any type of top 10 performances, we're just not seeing that right now. And James Cook also has 4 straight top 24 performances, including 2 of those being inside the top 10, one as the RB3 last week. And I'll tell you what, the usage of James Cook is inspiring. And is it any coincidence that we saw a huge jump in it coming out of the bye? I think not, because I really hope Buffalo took a step back and said, what do we need to do to get a little bit better on the offensive side of the ball? And the Kansas City Chiefs are not an extremely easy defense to run on. Now, it's a little bit easier right now than it has been earlier in the season, but James Cook still has a terrific day running the football and catching the football last week. And efficiency-wise, he's still averaging almost 5 yards per carry. But unfortunately, this week, going up against one of the top run defenses in all of football and the defense allowing the few fantasy points to the running back position, James Cook could have some issues. His floor, not great this week. His ceiling, also not great this week. But if the usage keeps up, that's what we really need from him. 20 or more touches in the 2 games prior to their bye and 15 touches last week. That's the mark, in between 15 and 20. If we can get there because of his potential work in the passing game, James Cook still has RB2 potential inside the top 24 and maybe even a little bit higher, maybe towards that RB15, RB16 range if you're in a full PPR league. But that's where he's got to make the money this week, because unfortunately on the ground, it may not be as nice as we would like. For anyone that thought they were going to be able to rely on somebody from the Baltimore backfield in the fantasy playoffs, they basically pranked you, because it has been nothing close to what we thought it may be over the last couple of weeks here. Gus Edwards, he is seeing a downward trend in terms of usage, and he just hasn't had any goal line opportunities to continue to try and score touchdowns like we saw in the previous weeks before this downward trend began. And Keaton Mitchell flashed some potential, some big plays, a couple of big touchdowns, and people thought he was going to take over and be a fantasy stud the rest of the way. But he is showing just how big play dependent he is, and if he doesn't get the volume, he's not putting together enough usage to have a safe floor. And for some reason or another, Justice Hill is playing a lot and doing absolutely nothing with it. He's essentially just out there. If they're behind or really on third down, Justice Hill is finding his way onto the field, but he's not really being targeted and he's not really running any routes. He's more like pass blocking, I guess. So Gus Edwards is not getting enough volume, and he could score a touchdown, but Baltimore would have to be like at the goal line to have that potential, which could be there. It's a good offense, and this isn't the worst matchup in the world throwing the football, so Gus Edwards could find his way down there. But Gus Edwards might get 6 touches this week, and even if he scores a touchdown, it may not be enough to get him that far inside the top 24 that we even want to risk it. And because of how much work Justice Hill is getting, Keaton Mitchell essentially has to do all of his work on the ground, or maybe get a few catches through the air. But Jacksonville's defense is super stingy, because right now they're still allowing the 4th fewest running yards during the season. I just don't see the upside with this backfield this week. Now, Keaton Mitchell could break a huge run and end up making the entire day based off that alone. But what we've seen over the last couple of weeks from him is not really enough to convince me to take a shot on that upside in such a poor matchup. Now, the hope is that Travis Etienne is starting to heal up a little bit. We haven't really seen a knock to his volume, though. The efficiency has taken a pretty bad turn over the last several weeks, but volume-wise, he's still averaging 20 touches per game, and that really hasn't changed, and he was able to find the end zone last week. Now, my biggest concern is that the efficiency is what's causing the biggest issues right now due to the rib injury, and with that, he's more of like a high-end RB2 than a middle-of-the-road RB1 like we saw earlier in the year. And given the state of the running back position, we really shouldn't even complain about that. Again, running backs that are getting you 20 touches a game need to be in your lineup regardless. I just think maybe we have to kind of bring back our expectations on what we're going to get from Travis Etienne, especially in a tougher matchup going up against Baltimore. So he becomes touchdown dependent once again. If he wants to be anywhere from like that 15 to 8 range, he's going to have to score a touchdown. If not, based on the volume alone, he's probably back towards that 24 to 20, probably 20 area, and not a whole lot of upside to go with it. The big plays just haven't been there as of recent because of the injury. The scoring is kind of backed off just a little bit as well, and a lot of it has to do with just a lot of inefficiencies from the Jags offense as a whole. But not having Christian Kirk means that Trevor Lawrence has to rely on his playmakers, and we know Travis Etienne is one of his favorite in the offense. It's been 3 straight weeks without a top 24 performance. He's been inside the top 10 only twice all season. He's been a top 12 running back once since week 5. And he's been outside the top 24 running backs 5 of his last 7 games. I'm old enough to remember everybody clowning the Detroit Lions at the beginning of the season for just moving on from DeAndre Swift after he put together several top 12 and top 24 finishes to begin the year. Looked like he was going to have some upside in this great Eagles offense. And really, since that spurt of offensive performances, he hasn't really done anything to earn our trust. And this week is a better matchup going up against Seattle, who is currently ranked 23rd against the run and allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the running back position. But if he can't get it done this week, if DeAndre Swift cannot find himself inside the top 24 for sure, but hopefully inside the top 15, then we really have to think about whether or not we are going to trust him the rest of the season. Because over the next 4 weeks, which includes this week, he gets the Seahawks, the Giants, the Cardinals, and then the Giants again. So while I'm not losing faith in DeAndre Swift to help us win a fantasy championship, because the matchups are absolutely going to be there, there have been some pretty easy matchups midway through the season that an opportunity was also squandered in. Whether it's his fault, whether it's the Eagles' play calling, whatever it may be. DeAndre Swift, you have basically let us down over the last month or so, but now is your time. Let's go, baby. this is where we win fantasy championships. And you may be able to throw all over the Philadelphia Eagles, but they're ranked 6th against the run still, allowing the 4th fewest fantasy points to the running back position. So for the Seattle Seahawks this week, really what is going to be the name of the game for the running back position? Last week with Kenneth Walker back and active, and Zach Charbonnet coming back from that knee bruise the week previous, they basically split snaps the entire time. And with such a tough offense to go up against, I just can't see either of them having a ton of value. Now, a lot of people would say, hey, Zach Charbonnet will be the guy in this matchup because they'll use him in the passing game if Seattle's trailing, but it's actually Kenneth Walker, when healthy, that does more damage through the air than what Zach Charbonnet does. So if you really want to risk it with either of these two guys, it would be Kenneth Walker and not Zach Charbonnet. Walker has an outside shot of getting inside the top 24 this week, but only if he gets the work in the passing game. There you have it, Headliner Nation. That's going to do it for me today. I got to get out of here and go talk about tight ends now, but I appreciate everybody tuning in to the running back video once again, especially if you're headed into the playoffs for week 1. For now, though, I got to leave you all here. Peace out, Headliner Nation. Stay safe and stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.